What? Was this us on time?
Oh my goodness, I'm still in shock. It will take my brain at least 7 more minutes to warm up.
Yes, good. Fortunately for everybody else, it will only take mine 8 minutes. So we'll have about...
Yeah, y'all can go get a cup of coffee if you want.
Yeah, so good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning!
Good morning, boys and girls.
Wow, happy Monday, everybody.
Welcome back. This is what?
Yes.
Episode
10.
19? Oh, 10.
10 to 10.
Yeah, we're becoming pretty good at this now.
You know, I was looking at the episode numbers in my filing naming convention, and I started out with a 0 in front, the 3 digits, and I was like, man, it's a good thing I did that because we're already on 2.
I know, right? Yeah, I like the optimism of the triple digit placeholder there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one benefit of doing it every day is that you know, you're whatever you want to or not, you're moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny when you think about it like that, but a little over a quarter of doing this, like if we could just go in quarters, then we're going to end up with tons of shows, tons of content.
Yeah.
Which will be great for all of you viewers out there because I know you just can't wait.
Can't get enough.
Oh, man.
I don't know about you, but my mailbox has just been full with people who are just, I need more.
Yeah, I've just been relegating everyone to spam. I'm practicing for when we're famous.
Oh, good. You got to make sure to keep those boundaries, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna start early. Just not answer any of my early fans who actually care, which is
Your
mostly
only
my
fans, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're about to say my mom.
Man, I was
right?
about to say that.
Right as I
I'm
was
so
about to say
glad. I was
only-
like, nope, my mom is not on OnlyFans.
That you know of.
Right.
That you know
I don't
of.
want to know. La 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 la.
Oh, man. Well, you know, so today I wanted to talk a little bit of... Oh, we got a fan. Nice.
Oh,
Hello.
that's my mom.
Look, she is a fan.
Oh,
Oh, my goodness. Hello. Welcome to the show. We're so glad you made it. You
Thanks,
can go ahead and
Mom.
put your OnlyFans link in the chat
No,
to share with the
We're
rest of
not
the
going to
group.
talk about OnlyFans anymore.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about friction while doing projects. And, you know,
Ooh, yeah.
I guess I don't want to over disclose what you're working on at your house unless you're open to share.
Oh no, it's fine
Okay,
to
cool.
share. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ryder is building a shed in the back of his house
Yeah.
for murdering people, you know, like
Right.
Dexter style.
Yeah, it's mostly I had Reed out this weekend to help him. He coated in plastic.
Narrowly escaped.
Yeah, right. But I'll get him back out eventually.
Yes.
Just put some candy bars in the middle of the floor, and I don't know what else. What would attract you, Reed? I'm just
You know,
curious.
That's a good question. Murderers for many, many years have been trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
They still haven't yet.
You're so wily.
Yes, but the thing about having a construction project is that pretty much you're always going to run into some sort of friction, right?
Oh man, it is always. It's and on multiple fronts, right? Sometimes it's the people you're working with, sometimes it's yourself, right? You create internal friction because what I've also found is there's always a better way.
Yeah.
And there's always an upgrade available. And like, of course, you're trying to like stay on a budget. And so you get angry when you're not on a budget, but of course you want the upgrade. So yeah, we've been having little frictions there. We've got some subcontractors we're working with, which is also some friction.
Yeah. I can only imagine. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I hadn't bought a house. And I can't remember if I said this little anecdote before, but I kind of always said, like, oh, I don't want a house because I don't want to deal with the upkeep and all of that kind of stuff. And I said, oh, I don't want to buy like a really old car because I don't always have to be working on it and things like that. So then I bought a 20-year-old RV, which is a car and a house combined.
Oh, man. And
So
there
I
were
kind
no problems, right?
No,
Everything was perfect.
golden, golden indeed.
Yeah.
So I can't, you know, completely relate, but I can definitely relate. Yeah.
What was the old Fight Club phrase? The things you own end up owning you. Right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I would expect that kind of wisdom from a soap maker.
Right. Clean your mouth out. Yeah. No, I do find this kind of fascinating because it is the deal with home ownership and so many other things is that, you know, you get these things because they're cool or you like them or you want some sort of autonomy or freedom. That's a wonderful selling point on the house is that you can do anything you want to this house. And then, of course, there's all these other burdens that come with that autonomy and freedom. So there's this like constant responsibility that shows up, which is something, of course, I've been trying to struggle with lately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I lately or yeah?
Forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking in.
Well,
on
I
that
think
one.
previously I just didn't care. I just wouldn't put my priorities into it. But now I'm starting to put my priorities into it, and I'm like, oh boy, this is a big project.
Yeah, and almost. I mean, don't let me put words in your mouth, but now that you've started to care, it's made it matter more because like you can see the things and you know like, oh, if I just did a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it starts you down kind of slippery slope of not only creating lists, but then freaking out about how you're going to get your lists done, what the costs are for everything, and it's kind of a cascading avalanche or something.
Yeah. Well, I I think kind of goes hand in hand with this, the friction and project processes. One, being willing to compromise, and two, being willing to say no to certain things. Right?
Yeah.
How have you seen that with this, whether it be the shed project or something else that's popped in lately?
Oh yeah, no, I think saying no is something that I'm not good at. Let's get that out of the way first. I've always kind of had this idea, and some of my art friends and I had it. We came up with it when we were younger. We just say yes to everything and just see where it takes you.
Yeah.
And it makes for a very interesting life. You do a lot of cool projects, but it can also make you start getting burnt out and resentful at some point. And then you're not showing up with your best self. So occasionally saying no is great, but I think Reed and I were just touching on this before the show opened this morning, but I'm a bit of a people pleaser as well. So you sort of add that in, and being able to work up the gusto to say no to things. It used to be really hard. I'm getting better at it. What's funny is I tend to get better at it the more sort of burnt out I am, which means that the no's become harsher.
Yeah. Oh,
That's not good.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like it makes it easier for you, but harder on others, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, I similarly have a no issue, but this year has been one of the ones where I've realized like, all right, I've got to prioritize, right? To touch a little bit back on our episode on Friday, let's see how many P's we can remember we had.
Oh,
Procrastination, prioritization,
Pouting.
What's that?
Pouting?
Pouting, yes, pouting was
And
in
then
there.
the last one, the famous
yeah,
one.
well, there's penises.
Yes.
Penis. I can't remember if it was singular or plural, but it was in there.
Peni.
Peni. Yeah, I think that's how it was. But yeah, so are there any other big times, whether it be a project that, I mean, I guess one benefit of the shed project is it's largely one you get to control. What about times where there's ones where you haven't had as much control, and how, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and guess it was maybe more frustrating.
Yeah, there's been situations. There's also things that come up with work, right? Because work is a fascinating one because you're sort of you put yourself into the job for the stability of the paycheck, and then whenever the boss, whoever that is, and whatever role you're in, has you doing something that you maybe don't want to do or you don't find efficient or whatever else, but you just sort of have to do it anyway to keep doing your quote job, right? Or to maintain the job. I find some of those to be pretty big and pretty difficult to get over. And there is a sort of a balancing beam of acts that go on in my head, right? When somebody requests something that I know they will never use, but it's going to take me, let's say, 30 hours of my time to put it together. And I'm just thinking there's all these other ways and things I should be doing that would be more beneficial and add more value to the company, but this is how you want me to spend my time, right? And this sort of does a short circuit in my head because it's what I want versus what somebody else wants. And this isn't playing the politics of doing a job very well to tell somebody that like what you want isn't valuable because I know better than you.
Yes.
So I end up just kind of having to bite the bullet sometimes and do these projects I don't want to do. This has happened to me in the art world. This happens to me in a lot of places where I get involved in something and about midway through, I'm like, I want out, but I'm already in.
Yeah.
And it's just like, for me, usually I just stay the course.
So this may be a little triggering for you, Ryder, but I got to see. Have you ever heard the phrase, but Ryder, can you do it that way?
Ryder, can you make the logo bigger?
Shift it just this way, just a little bit.
Yeah, just down 2 pixels.
I know that's periwinkle, but can you make it a little more purpley?
Yeah, I'm going to need some corn flour. I don't know.
Where does the corn flour come from?
I don't know. People just like come up with things. They're like, one of the fun things about doing design work, which is fascinating, is that whatever you do, somebody has to make a change to it. And there's a guy named Chip Kidd who does a book jacket design. He's got this book out there and he's fantastic. It's actually a really good book about design and sort of the ideas that he goes through to get to this book jacket cover, which is a very unique form of art. Because it's graphic, but it also has to convey information to you.
And it's sales too,
Yeah,
right?
and it's marketing, it's all these things. But he talks about actually doing this fantastic move, which I think about doing a lot, but I seldom do. But he would actually make the whole book jacket design that he thinks is perfect, and then he adds something really ridiculous or stupid on top of it, like, it would be perfectly really nice geometric cover, and then he'd just like throw a huge like star up in the corner that's like a gold star that looks completely out of place, because he knows when he takes it into the client has to find something to correct. Otherwise, they don't think it's their design. So they have to have ownership.
Nice.
Yeah. And so what he does is they come in and they're like, "Oh, I love everything. I love except for that star. I really want that star taken off." And he goes, "Oh, you're so wise. Wow, that is such a great idea."
Smart guy.
And then he says he just goes back to his office and drinks for 3 days and tells them it'll take 3 days to make the changes. And then he just hands them the jacket he already had designed. So you basically have to program in the feature to take out this sort of picadillo of human nature, which is to always have to touch and offer your insight and be sort of wiser than the designer.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's an interesting topic, especially because design is something that, it's ironic because I think it was a Friday we were talking about how so many people fall out of creativity and fall out of art and things like that, and they think that they can't. Yeah. But yet, it's something that people feel like they can relate to, and they think that they can have a say in and things like that. So I would imagine that design is definitely one of those fields that there are definitely specialists and people who are, whether it's technical or not, right? I mean, to have a good eye is one thing. And then to be able to make something look good from scratch is another thing. And then to be able to manipulate things to improve it, to make it look better, is yet another thing, at least in my breakdown. Would you agree with those categories?
I do. And there's, this sort of, what we're kind of doing is walking through what might be called design phases too, right? And in each one of them, you have to be a slightly different person. When you're doing marketing, like we're talking about for book jacket design, then there's a certain psychology of how the cell works, right? How you focus the attention throughout the design. So the design can look great, but if it doesn't convey the right emotion, doesn't convey the right point, well, then it's failing in its job. And what's really fascinating is certain books and book jacket design. So one of the novel ones he made was Jurassic Park. And you might remember that there's kind of a skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex on there, which is really kind of funny because there's way too many ribs on it, and there's all these kind of things, so it looks kind of scarier than it naturally would. But it's also a very stark design. And so there's some things like that he did that I thought were just really smart, but it ends up selling the book as a horror novel to a slight degree.
Interesting.
Which it may or may not be.
Yeah. And so a couple things that popped in my mind as you're talking about that. One, first off, just a quick mention about the dinosaurs. I don't think I'm going to be able to come up with the episode or show for that one, but basically, and it's probably multiple places I've heard it too, but just the fact that we see all of these pictures about what we think dinosaurs look like, and you see the movies and things like that, but there's a big chance that we're way off with a lot of those things, and one of those reasons is because as time goes on, different things decay at different rates, right? And so we get to see the bones, but for example, feathers were something that decayed much easier, and until you find certain ones. That's the cool thing about fossils, is you find something that was preserved just in the right way, you can then use that to extrapolate more information, right? And that's one of the ways. And this is all very rough, right? Don't quote me any scholarly articles on this, but that's one of the ways they found out how closely related dinosaurs are to birds, and actually closer to that than the kind of the reptiles that we typically kind of think. And then also the fact that you don't get to see the fat and stuff like that, which can drastically alter the appearance. And one of the examples they gave, and one of the things I was listening to, was like if you saw like a humpback whale, like the fossil of it would look way different because they're like such a large percentage of of fat.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
so like you have these things like the T-Rex or whatever, which you're saying like, oh, it looks all vicious, especially because it's the bones and stuff like that. Well, it's like, well, if you add in a beer belly to T-Rex, it looks a little bit different.
I know, right? Yeah. I know that they do things where they try to gauge how the weight would pull. Like, if you had weight in certain areas, it would shift the bone structure certain ways, and they've gotten pretty good at some of that. But there are little memes that hop around on the internet. So like, I'll see one, and it's like, here's a rabbit. Here's what somebody that looked at the fossil record would make it look like, and of course, it looks like a little zombie rat
Yeah.
that would kill you. And it's like, yeah. So this is the other thing. Is it could be really funny if the scientists were just back there going like, no, make the things
Yeah.
bigger, right? And they were just
Yeah.
having a whole game on us.
Oh, and I wish I could remember the name of it. I'm sure if I did some Googling later, I could find it. But yeah, they were talking with a guy or girl whose job it was to draw these dinosaurs,
yeah.
and they were talking about the transition, especially in the Jurassic Park age, meaning whenever the books and the movies were coming out, and because I mean, especially because again, those pictures were intended to do more than just that, right? I mean, in the case of Jurassic Park, they're intended to sell tickets and drive interest and make things a little scary, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, in the terms of the field of dinosaurs and stuff like that, it's same kind of thing. Like, hey, these are important, these are interesting. Here, give me some angle to work with, especially when you're trying to be like, hey, Mr. Congressman, who cares about all these other things, give me some money so we can dig holes in the ground, right?
Oh no, for sure. And then I think what some of this is getting into there are biases and incentives that sometimes we're not even aware of,
Right.
that are driving us in certain directions. And some of those are norms that we once you've seen enough renderings of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, that's just what it looks like. And it's really hard to reimagine after that. So I think there's some sort of difficulty there getting back to sort of a reset. But it's also, if your incentives are for sales and marketing and keeping your career afloat, to sort of circle all the way back around to these sort of job predicaments that you get in, then sometimes you're just like, well, I don't know what to do here. This is frustrating, but I need to go ahead and be productive within this space. So how do I handle that? Like, and I'm sure you've had similar situations. I mean, there is the entrepreneur thing, but you also had a day job for a while. Did you ever encounter any of these very strange situations that got you kind of frustrated?
Yeah, I would say there were a lot of times where I was frustrated, but for me, it was more so along, as nerdy as this may sound, like the organizational development and like kind of company culture and things like that, which let's go ahead and shift and talk a little bit about that, because that's kind of related, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. But it is about incentives and cost, and also paying attention to the larger picture, and being willing to make short-term sacrifice in terms of a larger good, things like that. But one of the things that I thought Boeing did very well was giving a venue and a place and a spot for employees to discuss things. I think they did a great job doing that. And there's like, hey, if you guys, want to come talk about ways to improve this thing, and it's very much like, if there, at least at our site, there were all sorts of things where they were kind of employee organized, like, and some of them were like, hey, these are just areas for us to improve each other, whether that be through some sort of training, could be diversity related, could be, leadership, could be any one of the skills that you want, right? Or some of them were more focused on the company and improving the company. And that's one of the areas where I thought they did a very good job providing the platform and the space. But where they didn't do very good is the follow through, right? Where you come up with all these ideas, you get all of these people here, oh, by the way, all on their own time, like after work or on lunch or whatnot. And you get them in a room and say, hey, tell us everything that's wrong, and tell us the things that could be improved, essentially. And then when it comes time to assigning the money and the people to actually doing the thing, which ties into charge lines and billing time and things like that. I imagine you have a little bit of experience with those kind of things, but there's a lot that comes into play when it comes to those things, because when somebody's paying per hour for a thing, it changes psychologically a lot.
Oh yes, yeah. Once again, your incentives are completely shifted when it's not about actually, say, finishing the product or efficiency. Yeah, I mean, you have incentives either way. And it's kind of funny, if you're not charging by the hour but by the project or by the product, there's also incentives there that can lead to sometimes an inferior product being moved out.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so the fact that the thing that got me the most was like they dangled the carrot
Mm-hmm.
and then they never let you have it. And
Yeah.
for
Wait,
me,
you wanted to be heard?
yeah, I know, right?
What? You thought you had
Not just
ideas?
heard, but then and then have those ideas
Yeah,
taken
yeah,
and done
right.
something with, right? And that was the thing where, and then it was like, man, one, I think it's worse that you did it and didn't follow through than didn't do it at all. And then also, guess what? You just like self-identified like a whole bunch of people who are one care about your company, and two, they're probably really good employees. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
there is a group of people to like reward and inspire and stimulate change in, like, why would you not want it to be that sub-selected group of people who said like, hey, we're here and we care about the company and we're trying to make
Yeah.
things better.
Yeah, that's a kind of a fascinating thing because it's also if you didn't know that there was an incentive structure, right? If you were just doing it out of the goodness of your heart and you somehow got rewarded for that, but it wasn't something they did frequently, well then that could be a really great, like you said, self-selection mechanism for rewarding people. It is fascinating at one of the colleges I worked at, then they had a culture that was very open, but what they would do is just have tons of meetings, and you would have all these meetings, and it was just all the time because they were an open community and they really wanted everyone contributing and participating, wanted to hear everyone's voice. But then they kind of sometimes just went ahead and did what they were going to do anyway. They just gave you the forum for everyone to voice and air their concerns so you could feel heard, and then they just went ahead and moved on. But at least you got to complain, and so there was this kind of idea of participation. There was a lot of participation. What I
Right.
think was so funny about it though is like you're talking about, the getting that sort of follow through where not only do they hear you but then they change things, like where that kind of transparency where you end up also going maybe top back down, where you have larger discussions, where you pull those people aside and you have more in-depth conversations with them. I think that's what it would mean to be fully heard or fully transparent. But instead, oftentimes I think we're all busy and you trim things down and then you set up lots of meetings and some people are going to opt out, and it doesn't always work very well. But what I also found was that there were secret meetings and politics going on behind the meetings, so that there's already an agenda set for every meeting that you show up to, and to not follow that agenda is to then not play the politics,
Yeah.
and so then you self-select as disgruntled. And so that's not a good role to be in as well.
Self-selecting as disgruntled. Would you ever say that you've done that?
Well, why don't I? What,
Uh,
me? No, I have kind of made the um, complaints at that college specifically. I made the complaint several times that they kept padding the managerial levels. So it went from like 4 levels to the president to like 5, and then to 6, and then each one of those people, when they got into their new role as a sub vice chancellor, whatever, it just the titles would get longer and longer, of development, of this, of that, and so they keep on raising people up into these roles, and each person has an initiative.
right.
And so the initiative inevitably fell back down on the faculty members. Okay, well, the initiative is for you to make your students take all these surveys and do this and do this. I'm sorry, but I've got 5 other initiatives I'm also running this year.
Right.
And then what would happen is after 2 years, the initiative would disappear because a person would get promoted into a different job.
And then
So
guess
there was
what? A new person, new
yeah,
initiative.
there's no
Right?
initiatives, but you never got the outcome from the last initiative.
Yeah, I saw some of that too. So my last role within Boeing, I was working. Um, Essentially, there was an executive, and I was working underneath him as a chief of staff or an assistant chief of staff. There was basically he had a chief of staff, and I worked side by side with them as basically another chief of staff. And so it was really interesting to see because he was in charge of 10,000 engineers across multiple divisions, right? And one of the benefits of having a large company like Boeing is that you have the balance of, okay, this business unit isn't doing so hot, but this one is. And so
Mm.
they can help balance each other out, bring the highs up, make the lows not as bad. But that can also work against you as well,
Yeah, yeah.
especially when you're working on the scales that Boeing is. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we're talking, tens of billions of dollars in revenue. Maybe it's probably over 100 in a year. Honestly, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's a lot of money. And when you have an issue, for example, when I was there, one of the issues was the new plane came out, the 787
Yeah,
Dreamliner,
yeah.
and there was some battery failure issue.
Yeah, there's been some very popular Boeing failures,
There have.
especially given the money and the contracts that they were under.
Yeah, and so when a failure like that comes along, well, guess what? Like billions of dollars are lost, and the money has to come from somewhere, right? And so, on one hand, it kind of stunk, but on the other hand, it was kind of cool to see like I was being there during that time and seeing like, all right, Boeing as a company, 140,000 employees, something like that. And oh, by the way, say they did 100 billion in revenue or something like that. Well, these business units that the site that I was involved in did a couple billion a year, like 1 to 5, something like that. So it's like not like the biggest piece of the pie, right? And then so that was like my site, that was the satellites and stuff like that. And then there was a larger defense and space and other stuff, and that's what this guy was in charge of. And so it was interesting to see because it was that classic like, hey, there's somebody above me saying like, hey, do these things.
Right.
Father
Right.
Boeing, Mother Boeing says,
Yes.
jump, and you say how high, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. This guy, well, and we should talk about that more in a little bit too. But I'm curious as well how you liked being under that structure. If you did, if you didn't, those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so having the things from the top, right, and then you have the stuff from the bottom, which kind of like we're talking about, employees or whatnot, and then you also have just your business unit's needs, right? And so it's like, oh well, hey, like, and there were some divisions like, look, our business is doing great, like
Right.
we're killing it, and we actually like right now, if you were to, because a big thing is dealing with headcount and a number of employees and things like that, because when you're dealing with costs, especially in the largely knowledge worker space, right? Salaries are where it comes down to.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is also sort of fascinating because certain people get certain salaries and they get a certain amount of prestige with that, and yeah, it turns into a whole bumpy game once again of incentives often. Yeah.
Yes. No. And well, and that is an interesting game that they play, because and I get it, right? But you have this group of people, right? And then you have to come up with these decisions. Like, all right, I have this one person who's an all-star, and they're very well compensated because of it. But let's just say they make, I'm going to make up easy numbers here, right? Let's just say they make 200K, and they've been with the company for a really long time. They do a really good thing. Like they are the reason that your product's great. And then you have a new person who's like $50,000, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, is that worth 4 people, or and
Right.
should I get rid of the 4 of these smaller people to get another one of this type of people?
Yeah, and these are those also really strange decisions because you start getting into yeah, is it worth 4 people, or is the expertise and knowledge this person with 200K has, does that make up for it? Would he be able to keep you in the long term from losing money? Because one of the things about people that come in fresh is they just say yes to everything. They're just so happy to have a job. And sometimes one of the problems that I guess Robert Jackow talks about this a little bit, but some of the older employees will actually give voice to their discontent, which makes them harder to manage.
Mm.
So some of the older employees are harder to manage. They're more opinionated. They have more authority within their space, maybe more expertise. And so people tend to be like, if we can get him out of here or her out of here, we can get 4 new people and all of them will just do what we ask.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the product coming out is going to be any better sometimes.
Yeah. So for those of you just joining us, we're talking a little bit about kind of the project process and a couple of different things that come up with it. So one, we were talking about the friction that comes up, the issues that happen, how you deal with them. We're also talking a little bit about incentives and how
Yeah.
that affects how the project goes, and both between the managers and the what we'll call the stakeholders,
Right, right. Yeah.
and then we're talking a little bit about organizational uh, politics and science, I guess, as well, because whether you realize it or not, how you're a part of the larger system makes a very big difference, and who's got what positions and titles and things like that. Like obviously, at some companies, that's a lot more important than others, but people having jobs and responsibilities and metrics,
Yeah,
things that they're
yeah,
measured
yeah.
by. Yeah.
Yeah, these are yeah, metrics. No one wants to be measured, right? This is the other thing is metrics are also a type of incentive, and insofar as that a lot of people can figure out how to game the metrics. And then you can look at the sheet and go, well, they're doing everything they need to be doing, yet there seems to be something missing within their work, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a fascinating thing to see as well.
That, I mean, that wasn't a. So you mentioned a couple things that kind of popped stuff in my head, and metrics was definitely one of them because. So it was metrics and initiatives, because you had mentioned that, oh, someone comes in, they have an initiative for a year or two, and then they go on to the next thing, or another person comes in, or somebody else said, hey, jump to the new thing. And, it's funny because, you talked about how some people may end up getting disgruntled and things like that. One of the patterns that I've seen a lot is, there's the people who, and I'd imagine this is true kind of across various things, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Like, as people are starting, whether it means a new career, a new job, or whatever, like they come in, they're interested, they're excited, they're jazzed, they're ready to make
Yeah.
changes, they're ready
They're
for the
all
new
fresh.
thing,
Yeah.
all fresh,
Oh,
right?
man. Just
And
starry-eyed.
yeah, and
Honeymoon
then they just get
phase.
beaten down, and
Yeah, a little at
their
a time.
expectations
Yeah.
lower, and then their
Oh.
drive lowers, and they basically they end up plateauing, and they'd be like, all right, I could go one of three ways. Like, I can just kind of be like coast and be like, whatever. I could kind of push up against it and fight it, and maybe make a little progress, but probably not too much. Or I could just not care at all and say, well,
Yeah.
I tried, I gave mine.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah, no, and you'll see it in every company as well, right? It's also one of the reasons I think the people get they roll their eyes so much at this fresh optimism that shows up, right? And other people are going like, there's some energy that I can,
Work with.
vampirically suck over onto my side. It is kind of funny how it gets almost politically bizarre to sort of watch what happens when a newbie arrives on stage. You'll get underneath somebody's wing, and all these kind of things, but you can kind of watch it play out. I mean, isn't that the reason that we have the youth, right? Is so that somebody could do the dishes when we were kids, and all this.
Make his shoes.
Yeah.
All those
So
kind of things.
as the older, wiser people, we can help guide them into doing the dishes better. But I kind of, yeah, I don't know. I like all of this kind of conversation around like the newbies that show up and the energy that they bring and all this kind of stuff, because of course when you're talking about people coming up and plateauing at some point, for me, I have found that I have about 2.5 to 3 years before I sort of hit this point where I feel like I have done all I can do within the company. I came in, they were flexible and open to me at first, and then gradually over time it closes down, closes down, closes down. And then the changes that you want to take or want to make actually require greater and greater effort. And so sometimes I'm curious if the system itself just has this built into it. I don't know if it's people. I don't know if it's a bureaucratic sort of pyramidal structure that actually sets these things up where it almost caps you out. And then after that, you have to do a longer, harder push to jump levels. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, and the short answer is, I don't know, right? But I think that it's a little bit of all of those things. I think we fall into certain patterns, and I think once you kind of get some of those ruts, kind of like, to use that term we used in the past, like as that company gets into that rut, and guess what? So like with the example of Boeing, well, guess what we see like over the years after that plays out, like, oh, this person goes to this company, this person goes to that company, because that's how it goes, especially I'd argue in the high performer space, if you will, right? Those who can, with somewhat ease, whether it's because they got lucky in their situation or their own doing, right? Separate conversation. But people who are identified as high performers have strong resumes and can go work elsewhere, right? That's what they do. Then they jump around, and then they make more money, and then they climb the ladder. So it's like, what is their incentives to stay? And the short answer is really not much. And in my mind, that's where the company is missing the thing, because it's like, in my mind, my hypothesis is that the more you invest in your people and the more you encourage that type of stuff, and oh, by the way, I also would say, and the more you fire the not necessarily the lower half, but the quicker you are to fire, and less you let people just kind of hang around.
Yeah, sort of prune the dead weight off the tree.
Yeah. And that's what I think leads to a larger long-term success. And and there's some companies that do what some would consider like a more cutthroat approach, where it's like every year the bottom 10% or 5% or whatever. I don't think that's the way to do it, at least not on that kind of cadence.
Setting up those kind of cadences is, oh man,
Talk
every
about the
year.
psychological traps,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Well, and it's a psychological trap for everybody, because somebody in that like once you have fired, say, the bottom 10% for 10 years running, right? Then there becomes this thing where there really isn't any more dead weight. You're now
Right.
artificially creating dead weight out of people who are probably fulfilling their job.
Right. That one can happen for sure as well. But the other thing was, well, there it goes. Just
Oh man, dropped. Hey,
yeah.
look at that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what better time to make a transition than when your
Yeah,
brain transitions
sure.
itself?
Yeah, I think our brains were tired talking about that, and I know our listeners were.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I'm just gonna make that up. Why not?
So let's talk about Friday, because I don't
Yeah,
think
let's
we've
do it.
referenced what we had on Friday. Well, we said we had the PPPPP, or however many it was. That's what our episode was about. But let's talk about what our challenges or challenge was on Friday.
Yeah, we had. Oh, I'm thinking of our personal
Our
challenge,
personal challenge.
which was
Yeah.
to come up with a title for the show.
Yes, that is one of the
Yeah,
challenges.
yeah,
So
that was the one I was thinking of.
we might as well address that, for our viewers at home. And so we have come up with a name, and some people may be a little bit miffed by it.
But I think it's good. I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah. So the name, at least for now, is TBD. Yes, something about finding those little holes you can weasel through.
That's how you know you're truly creative and meta at the same time, right? Like,
Yes.
you will not pin me down. I will give you a name that is not a name.
Yes, exactly. And I was thinking about that too. It's like, well, how meta could we get with this name? Because we could do a lot. But yeah.
So TBD, normally known as to be determined.
Right. And as I was thinking about it yesterday, I was like, well, our name could even be to be determined. You could come at it at the angle like, oh, every day is to be determined.
Well,
Like
yes.
you like everyone wakes up and you think you're gonna do a thing or go in that rut or that groove
Right.
or whatnot, but it's up to you to determine what that is, and what you're gonna do is to be determined. And then I
Yes.
also like the aspect of you gotta have a little bit of resolve, so you have to decide to be determined.
Oh, yeah, yeah. What are you going to do today? I'm going to be determined.
Yes.
All day.
But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that the first way I thought of TBD was when I thought of the phrase tired but determined.
That works for the show pretty well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and especially for right now when we're in the morning. I was like, hey,
Yes.
we're tired, but we're here and we're determined.
It's good. Well, and the more we go with the acronym, sorry, we can just come up with more and more titles for it. We could, possibly change it every week.
Exactly.
Maybe maybe y'all in the comments section, we can just take requests from the audience. What does TBD actually stand for?
Yes, and then maybe sometimes we'll even be clever enough to somehow tie it into the episode.
Oh man.
Whether or not we
See?
do that is still to be determined.
TBD.
But yeah, so that was one of our challenges from Friday. Another one was, I think it was related to procrastination.
Oh yes.
Yes, and we were encouraging people to make a little bit of progress on at least one thing that they have been putting off for a while.
Yeah.
Did you end up having anything for that or not yet?
I did. I actually I haven't. I have, of course, my other podcasts that I work on that I release much less frequently. Usually a couple of episodes a month, maybe two, right? And so I have been. It's been roughly 3 weeks since I've released anything on there. We're creeping up on 3 weeks at this point, and
And that podcast is, one more time, on the website.
Yeah. Let us think about it, and you can find it at letusthinkaboutit.com.
All right.
Yeah. The amateur hour. Yeah, it's me just talking about ideas and books that I read and things like that. And this latest one was partially sort of sparked from the conversations Reed and I have been having. A lot of it is about habits and self-optimization. And so this is going to sort of be a 4-part series that I'm jumping into now. So I've outlined all 4 parts, but I, for some reason in the last week, haven't got myself around to actually sitting down to record any of them. So I made a checklist for myself. and basically mapped out what my Sunday would look like to force me to get into the studio and start recording.
Then did it work?
It did. It did work. I ended up recording it and it went pretty quickly. And I'm like halfway through the editing process now. So I might even have it out like later today or tomorrow.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. That's good. Yeah, and by the way, whether you're here with us live or you're joining afterwards, we'd love to see what challenges you guys either have or you've already made progress on. So make sure to include that in the comments down below. And for me, my procrastination thing was hanging up curtains.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, and it was when I was hanging up these curtains when I came up with the name Tired But Determined. Yeah, because it was
Well,
about let's see, 11 o'clock last night when I was going to tweak some of the things and that.
No minute like the last minute.
No minute like the last minute. Yeah. So we were. So first we had the vertical blinds, which I may have brought these up before, but the worst invention mankind's ever made. So the first step was taking those blinds out, which we did perfectly successfully, and then we took off the little bar in the top, and then I went to go hang the curtain rod, and I realized our curtains were about 12 inches too short.
Oh, man. So what you didn't just like stack some Amazon boxes at the
Just-
bottom to block the light?
We
or
just called it
something?
the Lincoln window.
And the Lincoln gets to lay there.
Yeah.
By the way, for those of you that don't know, Lincoln is their amazingly furry dog.
Yeah, it is. He's not, Abraham Lincoln back from the dead. Unfortunately, that would be interesting. Just
Oh,
hanging around the
yes,
house.
yes. Did you ever see the film Abraham Lincoln, like Zombie Slayer? Or
Oh
something?
no, I did not.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I remember seeing the the preview or whatever.
Right. I think I sat through the whole movie.
Oh my. Did you come up with that movie?
No, but I wish I did.
Okay.
Like this is one of those ideas that I have, and I'm just like, no, that'll never work.
Yeah.
That will never work.
And then someone does it anyways.
And they make $1 billion on it. I've got so many of these good ideas, Reed. We should start going to the movie producing business.
I think that's a good next step for us. I would agree. I would agree. Well, so let's jump back to the the project process and dealing with that friction and trouble that come up, right? So that's, for example, with me when I was hanging my curtains, I figured out, oh, well, these aren't the right height. And fortunately for me, I'm the kind to measure before hanging things up. And so I was like, all right, let's hang this up. Let's have the tape measure, see how tall is this compared to where we want it to lay on, or not lay on the floor, but hang above the floor and things like that. And that's how we figured out it wasn't high. And then I was like, oh, well, let's just do it anyways. Look up the measurements. And then I was about to screw things in. And then I was like, well, let's see. Okay, does that measurement include how much is going to be above the ring versus below the ring?
Right.
And I was like, let's just wait until we get them in our hands before we do this step. Because the reality is like, what's the point? So have there been times where you were like, I can make this one step of progress, which could be good,
Right,
but
right.
I'm, it also could be bad. And have you run into that before?
Oh yeah, I would assume that this is pretty common, and it's something that I think I'm learning a little bit better with age. But when I was younger, I wouldn't have the right tool or wouldn't have the right thing, but because I wanted to get the project done, I would just find a way to make it work anyhow. And usually that meant that the solution wasn't optimal and maybe the thing would break or whatever else, or because I didn't want to go and make one more trip to Lowe's or Home Depot, then I wouldn't do it properly. And then this always ends up creating more hardships in the future. But you're kind of, at the same time, you feel like, well, I'm done with that thing. And there's some sort of cognitive relief that happens just being done with it, or you can chalk it off the list and you feel some sort of relief. But later you just end up dealing with this quasi broken kind of thing that's never going to function properly, or you end up making weird excuses around it or something, or it's like having a sink that's constantly dripping.
Oh man.
And you went and replaced the gasket, but you got maybe the wrong gasket and everything else, and you spent 2 hours on it, and then you were just like, I am done. That was my threshold. And then it just keeps dripping and you just have to ignore it. But it's like in the back of your mind, it's always
dripping.
Yes.
Slowly.
Yeah. No, there's little. So one of the things from doing so much DIY work is that there are times to do things. Sometimes you would feel great getting the thing done and it can boost your spirits, just getting something accomplished. but sometimes you're better off just waiting and actually
Yes.
doing things in a specific order, because it would really suck if you got those curtains up and you did it for a certain height, but then the curtains you get are, say, 3 inches higher than that, so they don't drag on the floor, and then you have to move everything again. Then you end up with double the holes in the wall and
Right.
double the work.
And especially if those holes end up being exposed, then they're
Oh,
visible, and
yeah,
it's
and
like,
then you
oh
gotta
my
patch
goodness.
them, and
Yeah.
yeah, it goes on, and so you end up creating more work for yourself just to do the temporary fix.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about similarly that concept of doing a little bit of work now to be better off for yourself later. We touched on that a little bit with Known last Wednesday
Mm-hmm.
when it was talking about mental health and how some people are not wanting to put that initial work in, and largely probably out of self-preservation and protection, and they know there's going to be a little
Right.
friction, they know there's going to be a little pain, but they don't realize that it's actually going to end up costing them more work and pain in the long run because they didn't put that in. And we also use the analogy of cars or houses or really pretty much anything, the idea of doing preventative maintenance to
Yeah.
keep things going.
Or yeah, and we've talked too about going to the dentist, right? Like you can go to the dentist for your teeth, but are you doing it for your brain? Are you doing it for your emotions? Are you doing it for your relationship? There's all these kinds of things, and fascinatingly enough, maybe going to the dentist twice a year isn't enough for your relationship, right? It might have to be more frequent than that.
Yes, especially if you're into role play about dentists. I mean, then maybe you need
It's
a lot
so
more
confusing.
drills,
Oh
but happy
no.
gas.
Yeah. Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to each his own, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's something really fascinating. One of the reasons I like doing DIY projects, or I like doing home repair, I like doing all this kind of stuff, is because I don't actually like it, but it teaches me a lot about myself.
Yes.
And I find that the lessons you learn from yourself and you can take away, like if you can get your mind to mentally go, wait, that went wrong, what went wrong? Because there's this other tendency to just force it, and you get like, you're like, well, I'm 90% of the way there, and you just keep trying to force that last 10% or whatever so you can just get done with the project. And this seems to be a tendency that I come across quite a bit, and then when I help people do other projects I come across it too. They're like, I'm this close to the finish line and I can't figure out why I'm not there yet or what's going on, and the frustration builds and amps up, and they just keep repeating the same movement over and over again. It's like they can't get themselves out of this loop
Yeah.
of this thing that isn't working, because they can see the finish line, it's right there, but they just can't quite get there because they're stuck. It's like their brain stopped working at some point. It's like I had a learning phase where I was going to be really curious about how everything worked, and then all of a sudden I stopped being curious and I just needed to finish.
Right. No, that's a really interesting point, because we also talked a little bit the other day about separating the do from the think, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important thing to do. But also, as you are doing, there are times, especially if you realize you're coming up against a barrier, especially the same one over and over again, where it's best for you to stop doing sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And to
Take a
step
break.
away, right? And
Yeah.
then realize, like, all right, I've now tried screwing this curtain rod hole in 5 times, and it hasn't worked any of those times. So maybe I go watch a video or read instructions,
Yeah,
or
we have this lovely thing called YouTube now.
Yeah.
That you can, when we talk about take a break, you could take a break for an hour.
Oh, no. You just like we talked about with their procrastination. You start off small. You say, "Oh, I'm just gonna watch this one
Just one
thing,"
video,
and
just
then you woke
one.
up 5 days later, and you're like, "Dang, I need a shower."
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's also the weird path you get on. Like, at least for me, what happens is I'm just like, oh, since I'm going to build out an office space inside my shop and then be able to do podcasting and stuff inside of there, then I get really curious about something, and I'm just like, okay, well, how big do the top beams have to be, and how long can they cantilever over if I want to do an extra space above? And I start getting into this, and all of a sudden, I'm off in la la land, right? I'm reading about different kinds of sheetrock, and then one of them is called wool, and then all of a sudden, I'm watching videos about getting actual wool from sheep as insulation. And it just keeps going. And I'm just like, what happened here? Like, I will never actually go shear a sheep to get insulation, but I'm watching a video about it right now.
You say that now.
I
Say
know,
that
I know.
now.
We do have enough land.
Well, it's one of the interesting things about doing something like building a shed, is especially the more you get into it and the more you do yourself, and you kind of have to educate yourself on a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And so this will bring up one topic for us to kind of close with today, is the Rome book club that we're in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we just had our first session of that yesterday. We had session 0 last week. And for those of you who aren't aware, there's a software called Rome Research, which I
Yeah.
think we've mentioned once or twice on the show before, but it's essentially a digital notebook. And it has a couple of things that are a little different about it that make it a little more powerful about kind of making the connections that your brain makes, but doing that within your notes and tying things together so they're linked and able to find each other and stuff like that. And so they have a book club that they have run by some volunteers, where you're using this Rome notebook, which they actually call a graph, and you're working with a larger group to dissect a book, or in this case, we're actually doing a couple of books.
Yeah, we have 2 books that we're going through right now, and Reed introduced me to Rome Research because I was using a different kind of note-taking software. So I switched over and have been just in love with this platform so far and have been using it daily, quite a bit, really. And it's been really nice. But what's fascinating about this book club is not only are you reading the books, but it's also teaching you better how to use the tool, and you're meeting people at the same time and hearing other people's thoughts. So it's kind of like networking and tool building and skill building and learning all sort of bundled up into one thing.
And to tie it back to the stuff I was talking about earlier with Boeing, the beautiful thing about this group is it's largely a self-selected group of people who are really curious and really enjoy learning and reading and new tools. And it's really
Yeah.
cool because it's a completely free thing, but yet like this has curated this amazing group of people who are very interesting, come from all sorts of backgrounds, and it's just so neat to see like, oh wow, there's someone from the Philippines who I can hear a chicken clucking in the background,
Right.
and they don't have power right now, but I guess they're using some sort of battery.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
and then there's this other person over in Australia where it's actually tomorrow and it's spring instead of fall.
Yeah, right.
Crazy
And
things
then
like
there's like
that.
the we had several people from San Francisco that happened to be in there, and every time they would talk, you would hear the jets going over, and everyone goes, "It's Fleet Week," you know. It was,
Yeah.
it was kind of nice. Yeah, and the discussions are good. What I was sort of blown away with during the first book club that we did was how intelligent and driven these people were, and I was just like, man, this is great.
Yeah.
Like, and it,
And
and
all ages too, by the
yes,
way.
just
Like some
across the
people who
board.
are, late teens or young 20s. And then I had a lady in my small group who's 76.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that is really cool in my mind, especially, not only are, no offense to people that are old, right? But when you're that old, you're not as well versed with technology of today in general. So it's like, man, you're still going, you're still at it, and you're using a tool like this is really cool. But the topic I wanted to talk about with this, one of the key focuses for this book club is talking about the concept of being a generalist versus a specialist. And one little thing that I kind of noticed that was coming up both, so there's a larger group discussion, which I think there are maybe about somewhere between 50 and 100 people. And then there's some smaller group discussions where you have breakouts after that, which is more like 5 to 10. And there was this trend to seem like everyone seemed to identify as a generalist.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny. Everyone in our group did too. Well, we had one guy that was a specialist, but even after declaring himself a specialist in this very niche form of law, then he went on to talk about all these other things he did. And so he was a generalist in his life, but a specialist in his work. And I found that to be sort of interesting that it was almost like the platform itself is selecting for these kinds of people. Or maybe we're all just generalists. Like,
Yes.
it's so strange to think about.
I first started to think the same thing you did, which was, oh, maybe we're all just self-selected and this is that type of thing. But then I started to lean more towards the other one, which is, no, I think everyone is a generalist. And I think really that was one of the things that probably should have been done a little better, was defining what does it mean to be a generalist
Oh
versus a
man,
specialist,
it's so
right?
funny you say that because that was the first comment that somebody made in our group is define what a generalist is, define what a specialist is. And oh my goodness, then it went on because it's very hard to actually figure out what those terms sort of mean. And all of us ended up just being like, I think we're all generalists. And then we go, well, then why do we all like the book? And we're like, yes, we like the book. Why do you like the book? Because it gives me permission to be what I already am.
Right. That was a very common theme for a lot of people in our group, and the smart people they were. A lot of people were like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I'm very biased reading this book because it's telling me I can do all the things that I want to do." And they're also concerned that the author himself was falling victim to the same trap. Right? It's just like,
Right.
oh, and this kind of gets into the causation versus correlation, or causation versus just kind of, I don't know, cherry picking different stories. But basically, some people were arguing, oh, he chose these stories to tell his story, right?
Yeah, no, he really did, and it's funny because when you go looking for something, you're gonna find it. Like if you decide that all cars on the road are, there's an overabundance of green cars, you will find green cars everywhere. It's whatever you start looking for, that's what your brain will sort of fixate on, and you'll find it. So he's got all these great stories about being a generalist and how amazing they are and everything else. Throughout the book, there's lots of anecdotes. And what we did this time for the book club that was kind of new to me is not doing an in-depth reading, but doing we basically this week we just sort of skimmed the book,
Right.
and it's an inspectional reading. And what was sort of fun about that is we all just had these vague intuitions about things. So when we show up in the book club, everyone's got vague intuitions, and we're all saying, well, I kind of read this one part a little bit, and this is what I was feeling from it, right? This was the gist of it in my brain.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating because we never had to drill down into details, really. We just stayed at that top generalist level for our own reading of it. We didn't even get down into the specialization.
And that was an interesting thing, and the term is called inspectional reading, and that whole skimming, which was introduced to at least me through the previous book in that book club, which was called How to Read a Book.
Yeah,
Right?
how to read a book. And the book before that was How to Take Smart Notes.
Yeah, so it gets a little bit
yeah.
meta in this book club, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing that inspectional reading, I thought was a really big shift, at least for me. And I heard similar things from other people in the group where it's like, it was kind of hard for me to not just start reading for completion, reading for analysis. It is a completely different experience to just go through quickly and just try and do that top level thing. And the book How to Read a Book was arguing like that is the first step, or one of the first steps you should do, is go do that top level thing, because guess what? Not everything's worth you reading.
Yeah, that's what was funny about this is I went through and did the sort of daily prompts for the book club and came up with a one sentence for every chapter. Like, well, this is what I think this chapter is teaching. And now I feel like I've got, like, let's say 80% out of the book that I need to get. I don't have the precise examples, but I think I have most of the concepts grasped loosely.
Right.
And that's probably a delusion, but at the same time, it feels like I read the book.
Yeah. Well, one nice thing about it is now you have that kind of your arms around the topic, right?
Yes.
And you don't know all of it, right? But you kind of know the bounds, right? And so similarly with your shed project or any kind of project, that's one thing that is kind of encouraged, is like, hey, look at the entire scope, see how things are going to play out, see how certain concepts or certain tasks tie together and what may depend on the other thing. So that way you can make sure you're focusing on the things that you need to focus on. And also you can recognize maybe, oh, these are some areas where I'm going to need to do a lot of work.
Oh, for sure.
Or I don't know anything around, my sheep insulation or what have you.
Right. Well, and it comes back to even mapping out these podcasts that I do, or writing an article or writing an art review, is there's all these kind of interesting things. You think you can just sit down and start. But that's this other weird delusion. And I know that we've been taught in school to do things like make an outline, but almost no one seems to do it.
Yep.
There's all these tips and tricks and tools that we have given to us throughout our lives. And most of us just ignore it. And we just plow on ahead the way we always do something. And I'm kind of curious about that instinct that we just keep moving forward just bullheadedly.
Yeah. Well, we talked last week, both Wednesday and probably the rest of the week as well, about how as we're going through life, we load different operating systems on ourselves,
yes.
As if we are a computer. We're loading different software every time we learn things, right? And if you take it all the way back to caveman times and animal times, I think we are just hardwired to persist and to move forward and survive, right?
Yeah, this would be that kind of hedgehog versus fox idea, right? That the hedgehog just does one thing all every day and they do it well, but it's just one thing.
Which
They're
is what? I don't know what a
Oh,
hedgehog
I don't.
does.
It like apparently it goes out and it gets one seed and then comes back,
Okay.
and that's it. And then there's something like in the hedgehog fox parable. Then the fox is like curious and jumps around and goes and tries all these different things out, and it lives a much more interesting, lively life. But when winter comes, the hedgehog has got all this stuff stored away and knows what it's doing, while the fox is like in completely like new circumstances, unsure of what to do, unsure of how to survive. So it takes a lot of energy for the fox to survive because it keeps jumping around.
Yeah.
And so there is kind of an argument against this kind of broad curiosity that you do need to specialize, you do need to find one thing, and there's little parables about this, and you can argue them either way. But I do find it kind of interesting to think that our narrative for a society is you need to hyper specialize. At least most of us feel that way. Yet, according to this book club, most of us don't.
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny because one of the most common questions, asked to kids, right, is what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Specialize, focus. And then, of course, like schools in France and in other places, they're making children decide by the time they're 12 or 13, you're going to be humanities or
Yeah, not to mention
science.
like China,
Oh, yeah.
they have hyper specialization over there, right? And there's benefits to that, right? Then you get people who are amazing at that thing, right? And you need both. I would argue, like if you want to have a rocket that goes to outer space, like you need to have someone who's so focused on a specific type of material that is coating the outside of the rocket so where it can work, right?
Right.
But then you also need someone who can talk to all of the different people and all of the different systems within that rocket, the thing that makes it get off the ground, the part that makes it talk to the earth, the targeting system that gets the rocket to go where it goes. Like you need someone who knows generally enough about each of those things to where they can talk to each of the specialists.
Yeah, there's a role for everybody in there. And what sort
Roll? I'm hungry. That sounds good.
Yeah, breakfast roll. Yeah, well, it is kind of curious though to when the school mandates these things. That's where we start getting into fuzzy territory. If the society that you grow up in mandates that at age 12 you are either a scientist or an artist, I mean, that's kind of strange to think about because I would tend to think that people that are interested in hyper specialization would find that niche anyway and specialize in it. But maybe that's not right. Like, I don't know.
Maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let's bring this to a challenge for today. And so we've been talking about the project process, the friction that you go through, some of the incentives that may be involved, and some of the times where you got to figure out you need to learn a whole bunch of different things, or do you need to specialize into one thing in order to get this project done, or if your project is life, if you wanted to abstract.
Project.
Yeah, my life project. Well, so one of the things we talked about too was doing that inspectional step where you're kind of going through at the top level or skimming or outlining. And so I'll propose something, and feel free to maybe Play-Doh it with, or manipulate it how you see fit. But I think a good challenge for people is to look at the rest of your week and create an outline for what the rest of the week looks like for you. And I would encourage you to not go too far into the weeds. Don't go down 17 steps, but just have a couple of things where it's like, hey, for writer, it was maybe I needed to start this podcast. I needed to do XYZ. But yeah, what does that look like for you? Just right now, or put it on your calendar, set yourself a reminder. Give yourself just 5 minutes at least to intentionally sit down and outline what is it that I want to do? What is it that I'm going to do the rest of this week?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. It's man, and what's really great too is to even think about blocking off certain days for certain activities and then just being able to focus on them that day.
Yes, and doing this outlining is a great thing that helps separate the do from the think, like we've talked about. And this outline is the first step, I think, and it could be just a simple bullet list, right? If you want to go as far as putting it on a calendar or something like that, you can. But the first step is to just sit down and take those 5 minutes to stop, think about what you need to be doing, think about what you want to be doing, and then give that rough outline for the week. I think I could maybe do that. What about you?
Yeah, give it a shot. Why not?
TBD.
Yes,
TBD.
we'll see tomorrow.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll see you guys tomorrow. This has been the morning show turned into TBD.
TBD.
We never introduced ourselves, so we might as well introduce ourselves at the very end. I'm Reed Garcia.
And I'm Ryder Richards.
And you guys have a wonderful Monday.